What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Right Side. Today I want to talk about the state of the right and offer an agenda for the future. With Donald Trump's victory and inauguration, it feels like a new era of politics is among us. Clear rejection of left-wing ideology, either economically with inflation courtesy of modern monetary theory, or socially with gender ideology, opens the floor and offers conservatives, Republicans, and the right an excellent opportunity to begin the social, cultural, and political repairs needed to fix this country. With the wind at our backs, we have work to do, both short and long term. Decades of conservative submission and concession sets the stage for the necessity for something different, because after all, in order for things to change, things need to change. For generations, the right has been stuck in defense and played it terribly. Key issues have slipped right through our fingers, leading to a shifting of the center of the political spectrum, resorting to resetting our stance and losing miles of ground to a force we believed only desired an inch. The destruction of the family and the church, sexual liberation, feminism, multiculturalism, birth rate collapse, and imminent default are only a few cancers that the right has allowed to grow and promulgate in an act of sacrificial appeasement, doing controlled burns to limit a liberal wildfire while failing to realize or accept that we aren't fighting against fire spreading from tree to tree, but instead a slow-moving wave of lava that doesn't care about mitigation. Like I said before, in order for things to change, things need to change. No longer can we play the game of moderation and risk everything else we still have. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Conservatives, Republicans, and the right have been insane for generations. This insanity has driven the right to the left and driven the left off a cliff. In this video, I want to lay out how the right needs to remind themselves of who they are, what the right needs to do to take back once conceded ground, and how the right can set up the next generation with the necessary tools and wisdom not to make the same defensive mistakes again. To start, we, conservatives, Republicans, and right-wingers need to look at ourselves in the mirror. Much of our modern principles are unrecognizable to what they once were. Foundational bedrock principles like marriage, self-accountability, duty, and faith have been sacrificed in the culture wars, and we have nothing to show for it. Considering the spread of leftism through our institutions, you'd think Marxists and communists rolled in on tanks. The truth is, we gave them up. We surrendered our institutions through apathy and appeasement. We stopped playing offense in the culture wars, lost the element of self-governing localism to the authoritarian socialists, and are stuck in the mindset of niceness and suicidal tolerance. We stood by as the gender ideologues went through the dictionary with a red pen, rewrote the language, and thus snatched control of our tongues. We abandoned the church in the spiritual battle to the atheistic hedonists, eliminating shame and stigma from our self-regulating society to the point of normalized promiscuity, widespread abortion, and the dissolution of marriage and the family. We let society get too comfortable with trading accountability for selfish, narcissistic validation. We let the importance of strong economics turn us into a materialistic society, where we find purpose and meaning not through divinity and relationships, but through empty material standards and greed instead. We bent the knee to Marxist political correctness, ceding the ground on the terms of engagement without even noticing it, in an effort to not offend and appear compassionate and tender. We got so addicted to foreign involvement that we forgot about those at home, starting and funding endless wars for the military-industrial complex at the cost of American lives, their families, and the future generations of this country. We were complicit in racking up the national debt, never once showing a spine and fiscal responsibility to the point where key demographics are now hooked and dependent on social services created by the left, those programs holding the financial future of my generations and those after me hostage. We naively took the left at their word on their intentions and desires, making a fool of ourselves in every culture war issue and refusing to treat the left for what they are, wolves in sheep's clothing. The past 60 to 80 years for the right has been an exercise in madness, trying to beat the left at their own game while doing nothing but stomping on the rake and smacking our own face. The only reprieve we got wasn't a victory on our behalf, but a fatal blunder on the part of the left. The recent radicalism raised the temperature too high, too fast for anyone not to notice. It took child mutilation to finally allow us to flank the left and play offense for the first time in a while. That's how far behind we let ourselves get. Just imagine where we would have been if the left had continued to slowly boil the water and kept everyone numb. While I'm grateful that we were able to find a cultural anchor in preserving the innocence of children, it should not have, under any circumstances, ever come down to them. The fact that we let them conquer the lives of the unborn in marriage before we got strong cultural backing is a direct indictment of our incompetent political and cultural strategizing. Quite frankly, Any conservative party that can't stand on protecting babies or something as fundamental as marriage as an anchor for victory hasn't conserved anything. Yesterday's Republican Party sold their souls and principles for the illusion of tolerance and the pursuit of political correctness. They sold our principles and values out for endless foreign wars, amnesty, cancerous social programs, broken families, multiculturalism, crime, DEI, a devalued dollar, and for what? A high GDP and shallow victories on prohibiting men and women's sports? Is that what we are happy with settling for? Sure, our birth rate is collapsing and young men are experiencing isolation and loneliness, but look, LeBron can't dunk on Jane anymore. Conservatives, Republicans, and right-wingers have been pushed back so far that we don't know where our true north is anymore. We've been stuck on defense for so long that we don't have much time left to score. The good news is there's still time, and enough of it to win the game, but not enough to be cute. We can take back the culture, but we can't afford to make the same mistakes we made before that got us here. We have a rare last-minute opportunity to fix things and save the country. But how do we do it? Now that we've identified and admitted to the problem, we know what to fix going forward. Modern problems require modern solutions, but there's nothing modern about left-wing ideology or human nature. Generational wisdom and history show us that civilizations are often cyclical. Putting these two together, we already know what we need to do to win again. For the moderate establishment conservatives and Republicans, it's not good. Stand on the same principles that the right has held to be sacred for decades and centuries. Principles that we've allowed through moderation and appeasement to be hardly recognizable to what we purport to stand for today, and communicate and advocate for these principles through modern avenues. Unlike the progressive left Marxists, we conservatives don't have to reinvent the wheel. Watching the woke leftists navigate the woke abyss truly is the blind leading the blind. When it comes to the alphabet mafia, as Belmar calls it, they truly seem to be making it up as they go. These people don't know what they believe. Their only principles are empty and shallow virtue signaling tolerance and suicidal empathy. With that being said, now that we know the overarching strategy, the next step is ironing out the correct mindset needed to effectively and efficiently stop out the leftist agenda. We lost the cultural battleground with the mentality that the left was playing by the same rules that we were, giving them the benefit of the doubt for decades in hopes that, eventually, their appetite will be satiated. Again, all this got us was millions upon millions of murdered babies, a redefining of the sacred covenant of marriage, and nearly allowing sick and wickedly evil so-called doctors, the same institutions that swore by lobotomies, to butcher children. If we are going to start winning again, we need to be real about our opponent so we know who we're fighting. This isn't JFK's Democrat Party or Bill Clinton's Democrat Party. This is a Leviathan, born from the halls of academia to groom and incestuously inbreed foot soldiers in the trenches of every nook and cranny of public life. A force disinterested in complacency or settling and focused on subversion and perversion. This type of opponent is not to be handled like a misguided friend, but like the snake in the grass that it is. They are agonizingly patient in their progress, but unmoving in their push. They are eager to accept appeasements and continue their march. They don't settle, moderate, or forget their missions. They lie, cheat, steal, and take advantage of the goodwill and good faith of others until they've accomplished their goal. We profess that we are the ones who can sleep at night with clean consciences after doing the right things, while our opponents don't sleep in their attempts to derail society. It's time we got comfortable publicly not giving them the benefit of the doubt and not gaslighting ourselves that the slippery slope is a historical pattern. A crucial mistake the right has made in their fight against the left for generations is being ashamed of the foundation of faith that grounds us in our morals, ethics, and principles. Instead of being sheepish about our faith behind closed doors or emptying our profession of it to others in an act of faux integrity, we need to be refreshingly unapologetic about the fundamental foundations of faith that drive our push to better the culture and society. Acting as if our principles aren't rooted in something other than the divine word is like doing a presentation on a topic you know nothing about. It makes us sound fake, empty, untrustworthy, slimy, and uncomfortable in our own skin. It turns out that abandoning your roots often disconnects your heart, mind, and soul. We can talk all day about policy positions and how we can stand for our principles and our fight for them, but without leaning on what we know to be true, and instead pretending to believe something that we don't, we have no true north and are stranded in the woods. So we have to look past their empty words of virtue and intention and forge our tools with the strength of the Lord out of unapologetic faith and courage. Now that we have a battle strategy and a weapons forgery, we must make the right tools to win on the battlefield. Rebuilding from the ground up means reinforcing the bedrock of our civilization. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Period. Children deserve to have a father and a mother to raise them, and deserve to be prioritized over their parents' petty and selfish impulses. which is why we must get rid of no-fault divorce, return the institution of marriage to what it once was, and reinforce it with the legal rigidity to force people to take the decision and union more seriously. With that strong foundation, we must treat motherhood like the honorable duty that it is, which is why we must extend the laws against murder to protect the unborn, making criminals out of abortionists, and finally punishing the rapist instead of the product. The core of any society is the strength of its families, and our laws and culture should reflect that pivotal importance. To address our birthright crisis, we must abolish the federal income tax for married couples with 4 or more kids, and decentralize aid, supplement, and support for families, young and old, away from the federal government and back to the local level and churches. Bringing communities together around the church should foster a symbiotic relationship. When it comes to IVF, strict rules and regulations ought to be followed to ensure that unwanted children aren't thrown in the trash. Regarding children without families, married couples should be given the ultimate preference. To make homemaking easier financially for younger families in our troubled economy, families with stay-at-home married mothers should be given a tax credit for raising the future of our country. To educate the next generation, we must federalize school choice, tear down the walls monopolizing schools by zip codes, and destigmatize and reinvigorate homeschooling options. Sexual education should be taken out of schools and have that duty restored to the parents. In exchange for sexual education, we ought to reintroduce basic classes on financial literacy and family operations like home economics so the next generation is prepared and knows how to handle money, create budgets, and plan for the future. Teaching them not about condoms and bananas, but instead how to balance a checkbook and pay their taxes. Treat children not as future economic units destined to be cogs in a machine, but instead to be future members of our society where you live to work, not work to live. To do this, we must revive trade schools to rebuild our labor force and destigmatize hard labor, ceasing the practice of treating K through 12 as a factory for universities. Allow local businesses to partner with public and private schools for apprenticeship opportunities. To graduate, seniors should be required to pass a U.S. citizenship test to ensure a basic understanding of civics, and so the next wave of adults entering society are informed by the Constitution and the functions of government. This way, we can ensure that we have an educated populace. In the instance a student is unable to meet these requirements and drop out, they may wait until 21 to vote or may enter military or other public service for at least 6 months. Upon graduation, graduates have 3 choices: work, college, or military service. If they choose to work, we should abolish a minimum wage to rid our society of unnecessary skill floors that lead to unemployment. If they decide to start their own business, they should not be suffocated by bureaucrats or regulations or terrified of being held hostage by workers through unions. That said, businesses should have every tool available to union bust and retain the ability to control who works for them, not the other way around. To protect individuals from monopolizing unions, we must pass a federal right to work law to protect workers who choose not to join a union from termination, making sure that workers and employers are free to agree to any term of employment they desire, with one side not having unjust leverage over the other. Protecting and fostering the entrepreneurial spirit that built this nation going back to the founding. Spurring a new class of tradesmen to make localities and communities self-sufficient upon themselves. The more local the power and freedom, the more individualized and tailored you can make the solutions and prescriptions. If they choose a university, we must cut all federal funding for universities and make them operate by market forces, making them earn their keep through honest work. Allowing businesses and schools the freedom to be dynamic is how we best compete with our adversaries, create explosive economic growth, and bring back the American dream, prioritizing STEM instead of abstract Marxist majors. If they choose the military, our focus on foreign affairs should prioritize American interests over pointless foreign wars or intervention. We should lead the world with peace through strength, for it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. We should revere our veterans for risking their lives for the ultimate sacrifice, a truly honorable group of citizens, and we should make sure that their needs are met and beyond. Have the military focused on controlled lethality and competence over any other metric. Culturally, we must rid society of the toxic gender ideology born from feminism. We must remind ourselves that the sexes are complementary, not adversarial. We must bring back into balance the yin and yang of femininity and masculinity. We must heavily reform the welfare state to cease the incentivization of single motherhood and bring fathers back. We must rid society of DEI and Marxism to preserve American meritocracy and true equality. We must revere the Constitution and the Founding Fathers' intentions and apply legal and constitutional principles fairly and justly. We should drill, frack, burn coal, and embrace nuclear to be the global leader and dominator of energy instead of watching the Green Lobby weaken our domestic energy infrastructure and submit to the will of China, Russia, and the Middle East. We should be unapologetically and unabashedly nationalist, truly American first in every sense, prioritizing the country over shallow economic metrics. Preserving and nurturing our American culture through highly selective immigration focused on assimilation and merit, separating culture from race. Teaching all of U.S. history, the good, bad, and ugly, without indoctrinating ourselves into self-loathing. Reminding ourselves that while we have made mistakes in the past, we are hypocritical because we deny our ideals and principles, And the fact that we have those ideals and principles in the first place should give us all hope that we can redeem ourselves from our sins and be better in the future. Also, be reminded that we are the last place on earth for freedom, courtesy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Protect the freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, due process, and, among others, the principle of federalism and states' rights. Be a country of 50 unique states, united under one flag and a unified culture. Last but not least, take a federal government-sized chainsaw to the federal bureaucracy.
Afuera!
Abolishing the Department of Education.
Afuera!
Phasing out Social Security.
Afuera!
Abolishing Planned Parenthood.
Afuera!
Reeling in the EPA, FDA, and ATF. Finally making the fiscal cuts to spending so we can start paying down the debt, and introducing an amendment to lock the Supreme Court at 9 justices to prevent court packing. Enforce the Sherman Antitrust Act to rule the practice of regulatory capture unconstitutional and tear down the barriers to entry, pouring gasoline on the entrepreneurial fire to explode innovation and increase competition. Being careful to attack gatekeeping behaviors and practices, but not those who succeed in business. Use tariffs to punish unethical labor laws abroad and make the U.S. domestic economy much more competitive. I want a very free domestic economy and protectionism abroad. Build a wall on the southern and, if needed, the northern border to get a hand on immigration into this country. Don't be squeamish or scared of their empty labels and attacks in the push for American greatness and American culture. To remove toxic degeneracy from society, we must foster the values of self-accountability, duty, honor, and self-respect, and be unafraid to shame and push others to be better. Man is not an island to himself, and there is no such thing as a private sin. We are all in this together, so the behaviors, habits, and attitudes you exude affect the collective culture of society. Despite my best intentions, I may not cover every policy issue facing this nation. But what it does is lay a framework of policy and attitude prescriptions to revive this great nation. However, as anyone who has ever worked hard to lose weight knows, losing weight is half the battle. The other half is keeping it off. The same goes for the current state of America. We can implement all the policies and make America great again. But how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can we pass down a political and cultural infrastructure to the next generation to preserve our prosperity? And what does it even look like? The best defense against the historical civilizational leftward shift comes from understanding where it comes from. It is common for champagne socialists to be very left-wing if they feel like they don't have merit. This is similar to young adults viewing success as a lottery system rather than born from hard work and persistence because they never saw their parents climb the economic ladder at a young age to know that success is created, not given or found. These young adults resent their parents' success after not experiencing or being taught about the struggle and the work it took to earn it, and instead seek to reallocate the seemingly ill-gotten gains to those their parents oppressed. The origins of this cycle come from the noble and good-intended desire to give the next generation better than what you had. The drive and motivation to give your children better than what you had is genuinely virtuous and generous. However, doing so often blinds children from seeing the improvements their parents make as they climb the economic ladder until all they know is a comfortable standard of living, and that guilt festers deep down. The greatest gift you can give to the next generation isn't money. It isn't a comfortable or posh standard of living. It's not a car. It's not a house. The greatest gift you can give to the next generation is wisdom. Wisdom is essential, but people often misunderstand what it means. There's a big difference between wisdom and advice. Wisdom can often be advice, but there's an important distinction. Advice is an individualized suggestion for a certain situation, like advising someone to take one job over another, or advising what decision they should make. Wisdom isn't individualized suggestions based on unique circumstances. Wisdom is the knowledge of things that do not change. Wisdom is principles, stories, and teachings on human nature. Wisdom is something to live and govern by. Advice is not. Wisdom is broadly applicable, where advice is often on a micro level and applicable specifically and narrowly. Wisdom can transcend time and generations, as they are facts of life and nature that do not change. Wisdom is a time capsule of insight and lessons learned from experience. The best thing you can do to preserve the principles of a healthy and functioning society, where neighbors hold each other accountable and look out for each other, isn't to pass down a generous amount of capital, but pass down things learned over a lifetime of prosperous habits and destructive tendencies. Through generational wisdom, we can stem the tendency for good times to produce weak men, which causes bad times. That civilizational cycle of strong men making good times and good times making weak men, who then make bad times, is historical evidence that bad times forge good men strong enough to lift society to good times, but the next generation, having lived through good times, never had to develop the strength necessary to sustain the good times, driving the good times to plummet the bad times. We are in trying times right now, with an economy not friendly to those in the next generation trying to gain a footing, and rapid degeneracy destroying the future of families. We conservatives, Republicans, and right-wingers have allowed weak men to destroy the financial future of the country with horrid spending and tolerance of degeneracy behind the veil of live and let live. We are forging a generation of strong men and women to right the ship and save the country. Once we reestablish America to its past greatness, we must arm the next generation, both with the wisdom gained through trench warfare and a culture war, and bless them with the gift of suffering and struggle. Wrapping a kid in bubble wrap doesn't teach them how to fall, and disinfecting everything doesn't improve your immune system. Shielding those you love from the suffering innate in life isn't helping them, but making them weaker and more dependent on you. The generation of strong men that build the good times must prepare their children to bear the load necessary to continue that prosperity. Without that preparation, training, and teaching, we are dropping the entire weight of a prospering society upon the shoulders of protected and sheltered men and women, setting them and society up for failure. Wisdom and suffering are the infrastructure we need to cultivate, to pass down to our children and grandchildren so that they can take after us in bearing the load and paying the price for prosperity. So don't focus on leaving your child with better material standards than you had, because the most valuable thing you can pay for your child is the price for a prosperous society and culture. In the end, we all feel the culture shifting. The tide is finally turning, but the cause of the shift and the turn is troubling. We played defense for too long, for no reason, and for nothing. It wasn't until the left encroached upon children that we were able to turn the cultural tide. That is unacceptable. Never should we have been so weak and spineless that we surrendered ground and were forced to anchor onto child sex change operations, letting the opposition get so far as to butcher little kids. Our cultural and economic failures are disgusting. We should look at each other in the mirror and be man enough to admit it. Only after that can we know how we let this happen so we can charge forth, rebuild, and ensure it doesn't happen again. The first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one. Today we have, and now we have an opportunity to retake the culture, revive the American dream, and pass down to the next generation a lead in the culture wars and the health of our nation. What must be done won't be easy, and expecting it to be so is an understatement of our position, but duty is obligatory, not voluntary. We have a duty to restore sanity and the good for the sake of future generations. But it all starts with changing what we've done before, because in order for things to change, things have to change. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button. If you'd like to support and help the channel grow, become a member, subscribe, and ring the bell to be updated with all my uploads. Finally, whether you agree or disagree, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I look forward to engaging with you guys in respectful and thoughtful discussions. With that said, I'll see you guys next video. See ya.
Afuera.